So greetings, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday Constantism study class. We have with us, as usual, some of our most dedicated brothers and sisters, Brother Pigeon, Brother Coco, Brother Carrington, Sister Myra, and Sister Khadija. So welcome. So welcome to our Thursday class again. As usual, we read and we share our thinking. We are still on chapter 1, and we are cruising slowly to the end. Of chapter 1, yeah? Chapter 2, my apologies. We are still on chapter 2, and we are cruising slowly towards the end of chapter 2, which is the relationship between philosophy and society. Basically, what is it about society that leads to the emergence of a philosophy, and why does philosophy emerge from societies? Every society has a philosophy or philosophies. Sometimes one philosophy dominates, sometimes two struggle for supremacy, sometimes there are more than two, and all of which are contending for supremacy in the way in which society is structured. So welcome. The reason we are focused on Constantism, which is the philosophy and ideology of decolonization, with particular reference to the African Revolution, is that we have come to the conclusion that the philosophy that can guide us in the African Revolution is none other than Constantism. And by the African Revolution, we mean the total liberation, unification, and the development of Africa. That, for us, is what we mean by the African Revolution. This revolution has been going on for a long time. It didn't start yesterday. It certainly didn't start when Nkrumah arrived in the Gold Coast in 1947. It has started for a long time. But as a movement, one can argue that it started in around 1901, when, or thereabouts, when the first Pan-African conference was held. So that is when the movement crystallized. And so there was then the search for answers to the African problem, which was that all of us, the entire African continent, except for a few, were under colonial domination. It is from that colonial domination that we sought total liberation, so that our continent will be united single-mindedly towards its development. Nkrumah has come and gone, so has our some of the great Pan-African fathers and mothers, and the continent is still not united. It's still divided, balkanized. We are still being exploited on a massive scale. We lose billions. Some have calculated as trillions of resources from the continent. There is no real investment in the continent, and we continue to be dominated by the former imperialist powers who were joined by America after the Cold War. Instead of helping to liberate Africa, they joined the pack of dogs and continued, and before it became the leading dog in our exploitation. So much they have a lot of control over the continent. They have military bases across the continent, and that is where we are. And One can argue that in the same way in which the translation of the works of Aristotle led to a cultural reawakening and explosion of knowledge and the desire to challenge the church and its domination of Europe in the Middle Ages, one can argue that Constantinism has that role to play. And so we here meet every Thursday and we read the texts and we share our thinking, and then we share it widely on social media platforms in the hope that it will awaken our, shall we say, sleeping or asleep brothers and sisters who think that liberalism, conservatism, social reformism, or Marxism will liberate the continent. It is our firm belief that no Western philosophy and ideology can liberate Africa. If Africa is to be liberated, it has to be done by the homegrown philosophy. And that for us is Constantinism. And we have the support of some of our leading thinkers, especially in Nigeria, who have looked at this matter and have concluded that, yes, so Constantinism is indeed an African philosophy. And so here we meet again to read and to discuss. And what we do is our tradition. We read. Anybody can read. Normally we read in turn. And in the past, we read more than one paragraph. Why not? But in our second round, this is our second round of reading the whole book again. New students have joined. Some of the old ones have left. Some of us have remained as teachers, as thinkers, as, if you like, resources, as supporters, but certainly as equal thinkers and leaders with everyone here. No one is supreme here. We are all equal. Everyone has a right to think what they like. They don't have to agree with what we read. But we ask them to share their thinking with us. And it is in that sharing of thinking and the sharing of ideas that we all grow together. So we read what is on the screen, and then we share our thinking. And that's how we do it. And everyone, as I said, has a right to share their thinking. It doesn't mean you must speak if you don't want to. Of course, you have a right not to say anything, but we encourage you to share your thinking, because sometimes you'll be amazed what you teach us when you speak. Of course, if you are driving and you can't share, you can't talk, we understand. So welcome, everyone. The time is 23 past 6, and we shall proceed with the reading and with the sharing. Thank you very much. The highlighted paragraphs today are 2. Usually Brother Pigeon highlights 1. He's highlighted 2 for us. So we thank him very much. So I would assume that is his view, that we should read 2 paragraphs today. So if it's okay with all of us, why not? Let's read the 2 paragraphs. So we have, can we have a volunteer to read for us, please? Thank you. By the way, Sister Mara, you're still here, aren't you? Sister Khadija, I believe you're right, sister. If one of you can start the reading for us, that would be great. Thank you. Once again, welcome everyone. Either Sister Khadija or Sister Myra. Thank you.
Aristotle was prevented from fully appreciating egalitarianism by his superstitious reverence for fact. The interdependence of the members of society implies the illegitimacy of the pursuit of sectional interests above the common good, or the achievement of the latter as a mere byproduct of the pursuit of the former. He has, however, been often misunderstood when he stresses that there are differences among men. Egalitarianism cannot mean the absence of difference. It does not require this. It recognizes and accepts differences among men, but allows them to make a difference only at the functional level.
This sentence, try to criticize this interdependence. And I think I had this feeling in the prior class that this, whatever Nkrumah, Aristotle was calling union of, what did he call it? Union of individuals. I felt that not everybody fit in that union of individual. And is what also I think Nkrumah is saying here, that it appears like a sectional interest. So it was not a holistic interest of the community, but rather it was to pursue a sectional interest. And that common good was not actually common good of the whole, but common good of those groupings of individuals who decided to join that union. And you see, Nkrumah then says that it was the pursuit of sectional interest above the common good. Yes, that whatever Aristotle was saying in the last paragraph, highest good or the ultimate goal. Okay, I'll come back to you, Brother Kwame. Let's proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Brother Kwame, you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I was saying that I think Brother Pigeon had come to a point of the discussion where I think Brother Carrington, it would be nice for you to come in because you defended, not to defend, you didn't defend. To be honest, to be fair to you, you didn't defend, but you explained why you expressed support, not for everything, but for some of what you felt he was saying. So I think it'd be a good point for you to come in here. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Brother Kwame, Brother Pigeon. As always, nice to hear from you. Sisters, brothers, how are you? So let's go to the above paragraph just a little bit. So, and the state is therefore founded upon an interdependence of men pursuing the same goal. The thing I was trying to explain last week is that I saw this as some form of, I don't know whether to say primitive or distilled or some other form of Ubuntu, where the state organically arises from the interactions of men, of people. And here I thought that the Osagyefo, when referring to Aristotle, was referring to people instead of men in the traditional sense of the word. Now, if you accept this interpretation of the previous paragraph, in my opinion, the next paragraph makes a bit more sense. Because if you are accepting of this idea that the state or society or community, whatever you want to call this thing, arises from the interaction of people carrying out specific roles in this society, then it follows logically that you should arrive at some form of egalitarianism, such that you would never conclude that your brain is superior to your lungs. It would be silly to conclude such a thing. The brain and the lungs fundamentally need each other. So that is how Aristotle's presuppositions of his understanding of Greek society, taken together with the facts, because Aristotle was kind of an empiricist, tried to be an empiricist. He took the facts of slavery in his society as a social reality, therefore undermining the full conclusion that he could carry from his logic in the previous paragraph. And it is himself preventing himself from arriving at these conclusions by not appreciating the logic of egalitarianism, by using the facts of his society to undermine the logic of egalitarianism. And this is why the Osagefo is a little bit critical in the, I will start with the second paragraph going back up, that reverence for facts does not mean inebriation with them, i.e. a respect for the reality of physical or social facts does not mean you get drunk on them, does not mean you take them as assumed. They can be questioned using a given philosophy. So I think that's how these two paragraphs and actually the previous one make sense to me. So, but the Osagefo is now introducing something that I think some people in the group had intuitions for, but were bringing out possibly sometimes in a sexist way, sometimes in a slightly racist way, sometimes in a sectarian way, that human beings by their nature, just like the brain and the liver, I will use this example because it is very useful, are structurally different. Sometimes genetically, the brain is carrying different material, but that does not imply superiority. Allow me to say that the world needs Europeans as it needs Asians, as it needs Africans. The world, the superorganism of the world needs all these people. So similarly, your body needs all your organs. And similarly, the community called East Africa, the community called Kenya, the community called Tanzania, Ghana, needs the Ashanti, needs the Fante, needs the Dagomba, needs everybody to interact and create a somehow super state out of these smaller nations. So Kwame is recognizing this fact and is saying that equality does not imply similarity. So the way I say three in Kiswahili, tatu, or the way Brother Pigeon would say it in Luo, or the way I would say it in Kikuyu, or the way you will say it in English, all these different, structurally different words imply the same idea of three. So similarity and equality are not the same thing. The problem Aristotle is facing is that he is asking for cooperation on two levels. And it is a problem now coming to our modern state, which ask for cooperation on two levels. So when the Gen Z started their protests, they were told that Kenya ni home, Kenya is home, just to remind them to be patriotic and to love their country. But in their way, these Gen Zs were actually declaring their love for their country, that they want better. They want to be more than unemployed, hopeless young people. They want more out of their country than that. So again, Aristotle is selling two different forms of cooperation, one based on education and understanding that you're a citizen, and another one, a forced, enforced cooperation, which he recognizes but does not challenge. So that is how I understand the paragraphs. Thank you.
Yeah, Brother Carrington, thank you for sharing your thoughts. So if you take the first paragraph, then you are saying your thoughts are that what? The first highlighted paragraph.
I was muted. The first
Paragraph. You are saying
paragraph
your
refers
yes,
to
your
yes,
thoughts about that.
one, that Aristotle was prevented from seeing egalitarianism by too much closeness with the reality of his society. I.e., he had the correct logic, but he misapplied the logic because of inebriation, as Osajefo says, with facts. So that is the basic reason for it. But
And
the
the second
logic
paragraph?
demanded in egalitarianism. The second paragraph, to push this point further, that Aristotle, now realizing that there is the reality of slavery, then starts to adopt two forms of cooperation. To first accept slavery, but also sell this idea of enlightened or active citizenship out of education and exposure. So he's selling these two things which are inconsistent.
Okay, so if in the second paragraph it goes on to say, and I read, thus it was not enough for Aristotle to recognize that there were slaves. He should have criticized the institution of slavery. Yeah.
Yes.
Which he didn't.
He didn't, because he was accepting of the facts of his social reality. Like we can accept the fact of the nation state in Africa, although we understand that it is not a real thing, we have accepted it as a fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Brother
Thanks for sharing your thinking. Yes, Brother Pigeon.
Of course, I'm free to contribute. I wanted to ask Brother Carrington, but let me contribute.
Well, you can ask him and then contribute. That's fine.
Now, I want to ask him on that last question you're asking. If Aristotle was exposed to the works of the previous philosophers on the subject on egalitarianism,
sorry, hold on. When you say he was exposed to the works,
yeah, I'm assuming Aristotle knew what Plato was standing for, or Socrates.
Okay, so we know that Socrates did not write anything. Yeah, he didn't put anything in writing. Plato, whatever he wrote 30 years after the death of Socrates. Aristotle was his student. Does that make sense? So when you say the works, any works that Aristotle would have been exposed to would have been the works of Plato, his master or his teacher.
Okay.
Which he claimed he got from Socrates.
Okay. Then I cannot blame Aristotle for this standpoint on actually ignoring egalitarianism or advancing slavery, because if he was not exposed to, unlike Plato, who knew the works of Socrates even if it was not in writing, who was actually a student of Socrates and had a different stand on Socrates' stand on egalitarianism, just by mere fact of education creating classes in a society, which then, you see, Nkrumah is trying to say here clearly, those differences are not fundamental. There can be differences in functional level, but does not mean fundamental, which means the structural differences. You see, as you're saying, irrespective of you being a teacher, I am a doctor, and Carrington is a physicist, does not mean that biologically, as a structure of being a human being, we are different. We can only have a functional differences. And you see, Plato insisted on that functional differences to create hierarchy. And the hierarchy of those who should be now the ruling class, the workers, and the rest.
Okay. So hold on. So, Brother Pigeon, hold on. So your question was to Brother Carrington earlier, and now are you rephrasing the question, or are you now answering your own question?
No. The moment you change the subject that Aristotle was not actually conversant with what Socrates stand for, but rather was conversant of what Plato stand for, then I will not blame him on this aspect that now Nkrumah is bringing on the second paragraph, which then you ask Brother Carrington.
Okay. So hold your thought there. The question then is, what was Plato's position on slavery? Because if Aristotle did not learn from Socrates and Plato did, and you Pigeon have eloquently told us what Socrates' position was. Good. Then the question then is, what was Plato's position on slavery? And is that where Aristotle got it from?
That is according to this reading and according to what you've explained currently on Aristotle's knowledge that he had. That's when Nkrumah says we are exposed to various philosophies, and such philosophy can then determine who you become. You remember Plato, actually, when the book Meno was quoted by Plato, because the Meno was written by Plato, not Socrates. But in that Meno, Socrates is introducing a slave boy, which means he was aware, even Socrates, of this in a society, that there was a seemingly hierarchy of persons or lesser persons in a society based on a functional level that Nkrumah is talking about here, based on the job cluster. And then Socrates wanted to demystify that by bringing a slave boy and proving that irrespective of his functional level, he was capable of any ability that any person was capable for. Therefore, they were no lesser or whatever based on their work.
Yes. So what you're saying is that Socrates did not accept slavery. He didn't. But Plato did.
In fact, Plato did, because Plato now went ahead to justify it based on what is now bringing the education and the classes in a society that create differences.
Okay, good. So can we see now where Aristotle got his reverence for facts from?
That's what I'm finding here.
That currently has emphasized.
No, that's what I'm finding here. Because now you see, when Plato's standpoint is that differences in terms of education could then create differences of what he feel like was actually functional differences, which Nkrumah is bringing aspect of functional differences. To Plato was beyond functional and maybe was more of a biological or whatever structure that brings now somebody becoming a slave in a society because he's a lesser being. And that's what brings now the structure of the ruling class and the rest. In fact, Plato went the extra mile even to argue that there were people who were either born to be in the first class, in other texts that he says, when you read that Meno fully, and he says that they were supposed to be secluded, just meant for kings. So from their birth, there were people who were meant for just kings, and they're supposed to be secluded. Which to him then could mean that there are some people who are meant to be slaves from their birth, and therefore could be left to be slaves. You see?
Excellent. Hold your thought there. Brother Carrington wants to contribute to the discussion, and then we'll come back to you again. Brother Carrington.
So yes, actually, Brother Pigeon has brought it out very, very nicely. Remember this and you, Brother Kwame, that these are all related people. So Socrates teaches Plato, who in essence teaches Aristotle. This is how it goes. Aristotle was in Plato's academy, school. Now, this is important because Plato is the person who writes everything that is associated with the philosophy of Socrates. And this means that Aristotle, in his growth, and I think he even explicitly talks about Socrates in his writing, must have been aware of the philosophies of Socrates. But different human beings respond to philosophies differently. So he responded to the philosophy advanced by Socrates by arguing, for example, that it is a social reality, that slavery exists, and that there could be differences, but these differences maybe, according to the Osagefo, are overstretched in previous writing or something like that. But there are differences that lead somebody to be a slave in a state. Plato is much more committing here. Plato does not believe fundamentally in democracy. Remember, we talked a little bit about the republic, and therefore this goes on and feeds into Aristotle's work on social theory, essentially. So that is very important. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, Brother Pigeon, you can come back now and continue sharing your thinking, and then we'll go to Sister Myra after that.
Now, just to still add up on this, I have highlighted this section particularly where Aristotle, on the subject of slavery, is said here that he even thought that slavery was right, provided the slave was naturally inferior. Now, the aspect of natural inferior, the differences created by education is not natural. What then Plato was insisting on, that some could become slave based on the other society or whatever you call job and whatever, could not be assumed as natural. For example, and I'll bring it to this context.
All right, hold on. Brother Carrington wants to respond.
Yes, this is exactly the point that I think that other paragraph is making, that because Aristotle cannot follow through the logic of his own argument because of the fact of slavery, he concludes that there is natural inferiority and superiority. Social fact is leading him to change his understanding of his philosophy, preventing him from completely accepting egalitarianism. That is how I understand it.
But that's not how Brother Pigeon understands it. So Brother Pigeon is saying that Aristotle misunderstood the origin of slavery. That Aristotle says that it is a natural phenomenon. That if you take a human being and you examine them under the microscope, physiologically, you can see properties of slavery. Is that true? So I think that's what Brother Pigeon is pointing at. But to understand you clearly, Brother Carrington, you are saying what? That, just so we understand what you're saying.
So I am saying that Aristotle began with what I would say a logically coherent idea that a state arises from the actions of individuals interacting with each other with a view of a common goal. Okay?
Yeah. But Carrington, hold on there.
Yeah.
Is what you are saying correct? Are you saying for sure that is how Aristotle's thinking went?
I am committing to that. I know
are you speculating?
I might be crucified philosophically here, but that is exactly what Aristotle says according to Osage 4 on the next paragraph.
Then you are speculating here, because what he says,
according to Aristotle, the next paragraph, the state is not a mere aggregate, it's not a collection of men.
Yeah, hold on.
But a union of individuals. But a union of individuals.
Yeah, hold on.
So there it is.
Yeah, fine. Hold on. I can't take one step back. Before that state becomes not a mere aggregation of men, but whatever, what is man? That is a question that Fidget is attention.
That is a very good question. that is a very good question. Yeah.
Permit me to proceed.
Please do.
Now we have actually become philosophers, because I think this is what Socrates was doing to people when they were asking questions and giving answers, which is the basic underlying fundamentals of philosophy. But Aristotle is guilty of two offenses. Prior to this paragraph I've highlighted here, look at the statement before it. That Aristotle criticizes neither the inequality of sexes nor the exploitation of slave labor. Then he never criticizes this. Then he comes here to say that he felt that some people are naturally inferior. And you see very well that then later down here, he comes again and now says,
Brother Pigeon, go up, because you missed something else. What about the next paragraph you didn't highlight? Look at the next sentence.
And
Sister Myra made a big thing out of it, if you remember. Look at the next sentence.
He said that he enjoyed his fellow countrymen. Now, and here is where Brother Carrington's statement comes in. Aristotle, thinking was informed by the social condition, what was being embraced in his society. You see? And that's why it said he enjoyed his countrymen. Because his countrymen were actually practicing this inequality, and encouraging slavery. His countrymen in Greek. You see, they were doing this. So Aristotle is then, I think when you talk of philosophy and society, Aristotle is now drawing his philosophy from the society, from his environment. You see, some people could all call it practical, but I think it is the work of a philosopher to go beyond practical or existing facts to critically analyze it and give direction. You don't become a philosopher by just explaining a society, but rather looking at the society in a critical lens, not at how it looks like, you see. Because
Brother Pigeon, hold on. You also write only thus far. Remember, what you're saying is correct, but only if your aim is to affirm the society in which you live. If your goal is to affirm the social structures in which you live, then your philosophy will affirm it, which is what he's doing. If your goal is to revolutionize that society, then you bring in an alternative philosophy. Remember, that is what you have said there. This discussion, if you like, it goes to the heart of this chapter: philosophy and society. Aha. Now, continue.
Now, this is actually what I think now Osajafo is now trying to look at it critically. I like how Nkrumah is putting this. Nkrumah tried to expose you deep down on how you think fully first. And he exposes you fully so that when it comes to criticize you, it's not that he's biased. He's now using proper logics to actually criticize your thinking. And this is philosophical.
Sorry, Brother Pigeon. Can I come in there? Because I love how you put it there. Can you see why now, when he wrote the book Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, the Americans went for him to the extent of overthrowing his government? Okay, you've nailed it right on the head. And even though he was trying to explain to them that, look, I am not saying you are bad people, I'm just going by analysis. So no, you are anti-American. You are anti-American. Whatever happens to you, you are responsible for that. And he had a call from Lyndon Johnson. That's him, from Johnson.
Yes, I have actually even shared that text with you. Remember, I've shared with you the report by CIA when he wrote that book, Neo-Colonialism, because they did a report about it. But then, coming from this background of a thinking of Aristotle, who then want to be viewed as a serious philosopher by just examining society and basing his thinking on a societal structure of Greece society, which you don't actually have issues with, but we have problem with how it was structured. That society as it was structured did not mean that because a society conducts its affairs the way they conduct, then it is right. Because if this society encouraged slavery, encouraged inequalities of sexes, we then Nkrumah, based on our prior understanding that all human beings are equal because they come from the same matter. And therefore, functional differences in a society, which Nkrumah now discuss here in this first paragraph, functional differences in a society should not mean natural or physical differences.
Okay.
Biological differences.
Okay, fine. Hold on. Can you go up again? I want Brother Carrington's view on this before then you complete what you were saying. Brother Carrington, please, can you comment on that highlighted paragraph? Because now we can see the nature of man or woman as understood by Aristotle. And that understanding of the nature of a human being is the basis now of the next paragraph, where he then explains the state. What do you think?
So there are two things that I feel are happening here. First, there's Aristotle's understanding of natural inferiority, which is clear, that there is a way the Greeks have of measuring spirit, which I will take as intellect, and then they decide on the basis of this whether the Romans were very good with this, but you're a barbarian or you're a Roman citizen, and then a barbarian is liable for enslavement, regardless of your color of skin, by the way. But the Osagefo is trying to push another important point down there, that this understanding of Aristotle has also been stretched too much. Can I go down? He has, however, been often misunderstood when he stresses that there are differences among men. Egalitarianism cannot mean the absence of difference. So the Osagefo is trying to caution us not to just simply take Aristotle's postulates like that Aristotle sort of had a more, can I say, philosophically sophisticated understanding for why different people had different roles in societies. And this occurs at those two levels which we spoke about, the level of voluntary cooperation through education and the level of enforced cooperation through slavery. And that there could be natural differences which justify these levels, but nonetheless, Aristotle recognizes that there is a fundamental inequality beyond this, i.e., there's a reason also why women cannot vote.
So can I ask you then, Brother Carrington, do you think that there are naturally inferior human beings?
No, I do not.
Okay,
But there are naturally different human beings.
Yeah, so if there aren't naturally inferior human beings, do you think an edifice built on such a foundation can be justified?
It's necessarily shaky. But the point here, actually,
so if
the point here,
if you build your edifice on a belief that is fundamentally wrong, doesn't that bring into question the entire edifice?
Now, what has Aristotle done? Has Aristotle...
He has built his whole edifice, apart from stealing our books. And they were his. Let's put that aside. He has built an entire philosophical edifice on the understanding, on the belief that there is such a thing as a naturally inferior human being, and then joining the Greeks to enslave. In fact, they didn't even use the word human being. In those days, they used the word race, although there is only one human race. There's such a thing as an inferior race. So if you don't accept that fundamental position, how then do you justify that edifice built on that?
So that is actually our disagreement for the last 2 weeks has been based on what Aristotle is doing. You believe that Aristotle has built a political theory out of a shaky foundation. The house has a shaky foundation, right? If I'm not wrong.
Is it a belief or is it what we are reading?
No, is it your position?
I'm just going by what we are sharing our thinking. We are sharing our thinking on what we are reading. So this is my thinking that the paragraph is saying that this is what Aristotle has done.
So my interpretation of what Aristotle has done is that he has the correct foundations, union of individuals. Those are the correct foundations. And then he has built a wall using paper. And then he has built a very heavy roof of Greek society. And that is why the house will fall down. But the postulates, the underlying postulates are firm.
Okay. Can I come in?
Brother PJ, hold on. The underlying postulate is that there are such a thing as inferior races, that it is okay to enslave. So that is the underlying postulate. We've read it ourselves.
No, actually, the Osagefo reminds us where he gets that fact. He gets that fact from looking at Greek society and becomes inebriated by that fact. So it's not an underlying postulate, it's a wall.
No, but that is his belief.
Yes, but it's a wall. The underlying philosophy.
What do you mean it's a wall?
Aristotle is trying to cause, and this is a problem with most political philosophies. This is why it is important to me. That the core ideas are usually correct. The core ideas of liberalism are sensible. The core ideas of communism are sensible. But the problem comes in this building of the wall. around these core ideas. And this is exactly the problem Aristotle is facing.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Let Brother Pigeon come in.
Yeah, we are hogging too much, and I need to hear Brother Coco.
Brother, to be honest, Brother Kwame, I didn't know we could have long conversation as an exchange between few of us, but
I must apologize that I haven't allowed you to basically share your thinking.
So let me finish my thinking.
Sorry, without interruption. So I apologize for that. But please.
Yeah, let me finish my thinking, then I can allow Sister Myra and Brother Coco. Now, I was in the first paragraph. I'm continuing with this third sentence in the first paragraph that says that he has, however, been often misunderstood. By whom? When he stresses the differences among men. I don't think that Aristotle, of course, Nkrumah is saying he has been often misunderstood. But he goes ahead in Nkrumah to say that egalitarianism cannot mean the absence of differences, which I actually appreciate, because that is very important and it's true. It does not require this. It doesn't require absence of differences. It recognizes and accepts differences among men, but allow them to make a difference only at a functional level. Beyond that, the differences are not allowed to make a difference. Beyond functional level, beyond being a farmer, a teacher, and a driver, you should never extend that differences beyond that, which means beyond somebody being, you should not extend beyond functional level, which then goes even beyond what we call gender. The differences should not exist to gender or sexes, you see, and the differences should not exist to biological structure, you see. So beyond that, differences are not allowed to make a difference, certainly not at the level of intrinsic worth of an individual. But actually, Aristotle is taking that worth away, and that's why last time I was saying the aggregate of men is not equivalent with the union of individual. And I said the word individual is actually different than the word man in Aristotle's meaning. And it's coming out here clearly, because to him, that's Nkrumah saying, that should not take intrinsic worth of a man. So an intrinsic worth of an individual is that is an individual, a human being with equal potential, and therefore his functional responsibility, for example, as a president of a country, I should not view the cleaners of a country to be lesser human beings because they clean. I should only recognize that there is cleaners in my country, but I should fight for their right and their responsibility as equal men. I should not allow mistreatment of cleaners or housemaids or housewives in my society because they are housewives and housemaids. They all require same treatment because beyond that functional level, they have a worth of equal being. And that's why I want to end my first paragraph contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the consolation you will have, Pigeon, is that Brother Carrington agrees with you in the sense that, as you recall, Brother Carrington's position is that if you take democracy, the principles are correct. It is the application that are wrong. So in that sense, the consolation is that he agrees with everything you have said. However, I still think there's a problem with believing that there are such a thing as an inferior race, apart from the fact that there aren't races in terms of many. There's only one human race. So I have a problem with Aristotle fundamentally.
Yeah,
I have a problem with that. But putting that aside, the question we could ask ourselves philosophically is, if you have a system that has the wrong foundation, can you, and it doesn't turn out correctly, or turns out correctly, can you still justify it? So for example, if I think that human beings, there are such a thing as an inferior human being, and I buy one, an enslaved one, and yet I educate him or her to the highest level, does that then make slavery okay? Am I making sense? Yeah. If I participate in slavery, and I buy an enslaved person, and I educate that enslaved person, so that enslaved person is one of the most educated in that society, and slavery is still going on, does that justify slavery? can we turn and say, well, slavery is okay in terms of its application? Because look, this guy is educated, even though he's a slave. I mean, can we say that? That for me is a fundamental problem. But putting that aside, we are still sharing our thinking. So, brother Coco had his hand up. Now, brother Blair also has his hand up. So, brother Coco, I know you were driving. So let me come back to you, brother Coco. I don't know if you can still speak because your hand is gone down, brother Glenroy. You coming first?
I can speak now.
You can speak.
I've stopped
Okay. So,
driving.
brother Glenroy, can you just hold your thought? Let
Sure.
brother Coco share his thinking, and then we'll hear from you, and then we'll go to Sister Mara, who will then share thinking on the reading.
I'll be with you in a sec,
Yeah.
okay, buddy? Give a sec.
Brother Coco, I take it you are responding to the discussion rather than sharing your thinking on the reading. Is that correct?
Both.
No,
It's both.
It would not be fair. So if you want to share your thinking on the reading, then hold on. Yeah, is that okay?
All right. If you
Yeah,
want.
hold on. So let's hear from brother Glenroy, who also wants to respond to the discussion rather than his thoughts on the reading. Yeah.
Well,
go on,
yeah,
brother.
my response is to the statement or question you've just asked, because I think that there have been many varied forms of enslavement, not all chattel enslavement. So I think that's the distinction. The point you make about educating an enslaved person is clearly that distinction, because chattel slavery, it was illegal to educate enslaved people. Indeed, it was punishable, I think, by, if not death, imprisonment. So the example you gave, I think there are various examples in society of what is basically serfdom of some sort, or the enslavement that exists in Greek society and Roman society. I'm not sure if necessarily the same level of education existed in the Roman society, Roman society, as perhaps did in the Greek. But yeah, just trying to make that distinction. Whilst your example is brings up an interesting point. Does that person remain inferior? Because clearly, one of the things we said about enslaved or captured warriors on the continent in African society is that they were able eventually to become part of that society, marry into the various nations that they were captured by. These were largely prisoners of war. Whether we give them that clear distinction of enslavement is another issue, but very much to respond to you is no, that's a different type of enslavement, and indeed a person would progress in a situation like that. I'm not saying it's a good thing in the start.
Yeah, so
that's the point. Yeah,
that's fine. So brother Glenroy, my question was, whatever the type of slavery, including the progressive kind, like you've just expounded, does that make Aristotle's belief in the inferiority of a race justified? I mean, that for me is a question I was raising.
But he was wrong. He would be wrong by the very necessity, the very outcome of that educational process.
But then I would say, but the current doesn't think it's wrong per se. Even if it's wrong, but the current's view is that as long as if it produces good results, then it is okay. But the current, am I saying the way you believe it?
Not at all.
Okay, in that case,
but let people continue and then
I withdraw that. Let's hear from Sister Myra, and then we'll come back to you later. Thank you.
Thank you, members, for that very interesting discussion. So I'll start with the first paragraph. I quite like Dr. Nkrumah's description of egalitarianism. I think that's a term that's misunderstood when we say, is everyone equal? Well, no, some people are better at other things than that, and that thing But he's saying, no, listen, it's fine. There's always differences among men or human beings. That's natural, that's normal. But what he's talking about is the worth of the human being, be they a child, be they poor, be they rich, woman, man, their worth as a human being is the same. But one will be like someone has given an example already, one will be a teacher, then there will be a doctor. And I think for Nkrumah, I think if he was to extend this, he would say the idea is for the teachers, the doctors, and the market vendors to all work together. This thinking of selective egalitarianism is kind of contradicted because Aristotle says that the interdependence of the members of society. No, sorry. The author says the interdependence of the members of society implies the illegitimacy of the pursuit of sectional interests above the common good. But I think Aristotle, when he was talking about interdependence of men, he was saying he was referring to a section of that Greek society, a sectional interest of the Greek aristocracy. The slaves didn't matter. They were just there to objects, subhumans, right? So then in the second paragraph, Nkrumah then goes on to
Sister Mara, hold on, just so we understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the second sentence of the first paragraph, the interdependence of the members of society implies the illegitimacy of the pursuit of sectional interests above the common good. What are you saying? So just so I hear clearly what
I'm saying that if interdependence of the member society, right? If that's what makes Aristotle's society, as we've read in the above paragraphs, then the society shouldn't only be about the pursuit of the interest of a small section, but it should be for the common good.
Yes, but isn't that the point though? Okay, so let's take from the position where all human beings are equal. If all of us are equal and we come together and we set up a society, then that interdependence amongst us implies that whatever we pursue is legitimate in the sense that it reflects the, if you like, the position of all of us, our interests. Yeah. Okay. But if you have a society in which certain groups are slaves, how then can you say that the interdependence of the members of such a society is legitimate?
So then you took my next point right out of my mouth. So
thanks. So that is the point that sentence is making.
Yeah.
Go on.
And I feel that that's what Dr. Nkrumah expanded on in the second paragraph. In the second paragraph, right? Because Aristotle is talking about all this egalitarianism among his peers, the aristocracy. But obviously, this doesn't include the slaves, right? And Aristotle then goes ahead to expound on this philosophy, which really is justifying slavery. And in doing that, it's only looking at the interest of the section, the small number of aristocrats, right? And yet it's dressed up as he talks about this egalitarianism. So there's some contradictions there in Aristotle's thinking, where egalitarianism is okay for a section of the society, but it's not meant for the slaves of the society.
But Sister Mara, do you think that it is a contradiction that can be justified on the basis that he simply misapplied a good theory, which is what Brother Carrington was telling you.
Okay.
Or do you
So that's
think?
what-
Do you think it's not just? Sorry. Do you think it's not just a contradiction? It is based on a fundamental error.
So that's one of the points that I wanted to also reply to, right?
Okay, go on.
I do not think so. Right. I think everything that these European philosophers that we are learning about right up to Aristotle, that everything that came out of their minds and therefore the words that they formed was not an error to them. It was a deliberate, intentional, cerebral exercise on their part to contort and distort reality in order to serve their needs.
Do you have evidence about that?
Because they're idealists, Brother Kwame.
But Socrates is not right. But Sister Myra, Socrates don't write anything. And Plato told us what Socrates said, but we don't know what Socrates said. So we're only going by Plato's word that this is what Socrates said.
Fair enough. But I'm going to use the word.
I'm just saying that we can't make that conclusion on all of them because we don't know what. So Socrates is seen as, if you like, the father of Western philosophy. Yeah. He is a person from whom everyone, if you like, emanates. And yet, like Orunmila of the Yoruba Ifa, he wrote nothing. So I don't think we can conclude that what Plato said he said is a cerebral, if you like, statement of what Socrates thought. But we hear you. We hear what you're saying.
In that case, I'll start with Plato. I'll still stand by what I said. I'll start from Plato and then go on to Aristotle. It was all their philosophy was to justify a small rich class to exploit the masses, the slaves that were,
so
working hard.
Yeah, fine. So here you are saying, fine. So you are saying that what you're saying correctly, you are saying it applies to what Plato wrote and what Aristotle wrote.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
But
and
it can't apply to what Socrates wrote because we don't know what he wrote.
Fair enough. I've taken that point. And I think what Aristotle, that distortion just to justify slavery and therefore the supremacy of a small rich aristocratic class can be extended to contemporary times, where still this kind of thinking is to justify European racist supremacy. It's deliberate.
So, Sister Mara, can I ask you again?
Yes.
If they were all idealists, like you say, and you say that it was a cerebral exercise, which means that it was their mind, they expressing what is in their mind. Are you suggesting that we should accept an idealist's explanation of what they wrote?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's another thing. No, because Brother Nkrumah, what Dr. Nkrumah is saying is that he's been telling us that the philosophy of any time speaks to whatever societal pressures and whatever is going on in society. So this is what we're reading about is what was going on in Aristotle's society. But that was his society. That was his view. Although now we live in a dominant European system, but should we accept it as fact? No.
Fine. Then in that sense, you can't then say that it's a cerebral, it's the origin of that, if you like, that idea that human beings can be naturally inferior is cerebral to
Mm.
the white psyche. Am I making sense? Yeah, am I making sense? That it is, you cannot just say that. You could say that because we are materialists. You can say, well, you can trace its origin to the social milieu, the environmental contexts in which they lived, and that they were expressing the ideas of their contemporary context.
Exactly.
And therefore, in that sense, it is no more cerebral for a Plato or Aristotle to say what he said than for an African prince of today to say that he believes that there are other ethnic groups that are inferior, naturally inferior. Yeah.
But that is not what we believe as Africans.
Yes. Yes.
But they are not African.
Brother Kwame.
Yes.
As you will move to the next speaker, I think, Brother Coco, I'll ask just a question for our thinking as you move to Brother Coco. If I am your student and I study what you say or what you read, then how comes I'll speak different to what you teach me? Is it that I find weakness on what you teach, or is it that I intentionally decide to come with my own way to express what you teach? Because if Plato is a student of Socrates, Socrates is not actually allowing these differences to be actually intrinsic as Plato was seeing it. Then where is Plato getting his grounding to actually explore further intrinsic differences than functional differences?
Well, it's a good question. Let Sister Myra have a crack at it before
again, it was the political situation, the societal organization of the time that formed whatever ideas he put forward as a philosophy. That's what I think.
Okay, so let's move on to, thank you, Sister Samara. Sorry, finish what you were saying and then move on to Brother Coco. Yeah.
I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover.
Okay, but before you go, can I ask one more question? You rightly said that in Africa we don't believe that a human being is fundamentally inferior. Yeah. So that is what we say. But what if our practice affirms that? So what if you are a king, let's say king of Swaziland, and say, well, we don't believe that any human being is inferior. And yet you pursue policies that enslave your people. Do we go by what you say you believe, or do we go by what you're doing?
You'll go by my actions, but then I'm a big hypocrite. My spirit is not clear. It's not clean.
But then are your actions not exposing your real thinking, what you really think?
Yes, they do.
Anyway,
and wouldn't you apply that same exactly that statement you've made to the so-called European human rights?
Well, that's what brother Pigeon was saying, that where would that idea have come from if it is not fundamental to that group? Yeah, but in terms of slavery, enslavement, can we say that brother Gloria has pointed out that there are different forms of slavery? Can we say that because there are different forms, it implies that Africans believe differently from Europeans? Can we say that for sure? Not in terms of what they've said, but in terms of what they have done.
In terms of what we have done, Brother Kwame, we've had years and years of brokenness because of external influence. We don't even know who we are anymore.
Thank you. Brother Coco, a good time for you to come in and share your thinking.
After all the ideas have been discussed. Now I don't have any room for anything else.
You have a lot.
Um,
You have a lot.
okay, let me try.
You have a lot from the Lesotho context that you can share with us.
So it is not just from the Lesotho context. It's more of taking the text and understanding what Dr. Nkrumah is saying about Aristotle
Precisely.
and equality of men, education, injustice, tyranny. There are a lot of things which he said in those two paragraphs. It's two paragraphs which are loaded with so much that we can use to critique Aristotle himself. So one of those is education. At the end there it says, everywhere he was always underscoring the necessity of education. So here, let's talk about education. Looking at what Plutarch said, who is one of the students later on of Pluto, he says, the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. So in that saying, we have to appreciate that we educate people so they can go out to be better people. They can go out to think critically about solutions, about ideas, about things. But what Dr. Nkrumah is stressing here is that Aristotle was fascinated with facts. And he stopped right there and decided, this is it. I am here and I'm going to defend the facts. He wasn't open-minded, which is part of being a critical thinker and part of showing that you are educated or your mind has been kindled to quest for more. So I liked what you said before when you were talking to Brother Carrington, to say it was more of an affirmation of what was happening in his time and his society rather than a revolution. A revolution is wanting for better, is appreciating that there are better ways of looking at things or better ways of doing things. In fact, there is that word there, appreciation that he was prevented from fully appreciating egalitarianism by his superstitious reverence for facts. So anything that he had to look at, it had to be backed up by facts. But of course, then he missed the point. He missed the point. You can't say, okay, we are starting from here and we just have to stay from there. Because this is what he's doing. He's saying, okay, we have slavery, and then that's it. It's like when you take kids and you educate them, one who is educated in a colonial education, he's just indoctrinated to think within that context and nothing else, not outside of that context. But someone else who has been educated to think outside the box, to see the bigger picture and understand that the world doesn't end there within that colonial box that he has been put into, then they sort of are able to see the world in a different lenses, in different lenses, other than what Aristotle has done here. So to me, Aristotle hasn't changed the world for me. He just restated
can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
So if you are Aristotle, what would you do? The master of your master was killed because of this very thing that you're asking him to do. He's the master of his master. Socrates is a master of Plato. Plato is a master of Aristotle. And Socrates was killed because of what was seen as his attempt to spark a revolution.
So
then Plato, the student of Socrates, disagreed with his master and attempted or thought slavery was good. If you were Aristotle, what would you do, sir?
So Aristotle, falls within that box of intergenerational trauma, or not just intergenerational trauma, again, indoctrination. So let's say he was indoctrinated by Pluto and he decided to just end there. He did not want to look outside and think, what else can I do? And again, this is what Dr. Nkrumah says to us.
But hold on, do you think, do you think it was indoctrination, or do you think that because the death of Socrates and the birth of Aristotle is 15 years, yeah, 15 years different.
Yeah.
But the death of Socrates, or his murder, if you like, or his execution, is something that is real and has reverberated in Greek society. So
yes,
so I was curious to know what you would have done if you were in his position, because being enamored with the system, do you not think that is what normally happens? I mean, look at African leaders today. How many of them are not enamored with imperialism or with neocolonialism? How many African leaders do you see that are saying, actually, we don't like neocolonialism, let's meet and set up a united Africa so we can build a new Africa that finds this, that does is different? How many?
about 5 out of 54.
So
About 5
could
out of
we
54.
so could we say that what Aristotle is doing is not different from what a lot of people do?
No. So I think what you're trying to do is you are helping us to see him as a human being with faults like all the other human beings. But all I'm trying to say is that I don't see much that he has done, because he has been restrained by that fear of being in the line of people like Socrates. So he just went ahead and maintained the order that was established by Pluto. Even if
Brother Koko, since 1948, 47, when Nkrumah arrived and started fighting for independence, to 2024, we've had presidents come and gone. Some have said a lot of years. How many have gone against the system? How many?
Sankara, Lumumba.
We can count them, can't we, on our fingertips?
Sankara, Lumumba, Magufuli, and most of them are dead.
Yeah, and Nkrumah and how many years? We are talking about over shall we say, over 70 years?
No.
Yeah, but over 70 years. Over 70 years.
Brother
and let's not forget, it's not just fear, is being, as you said, enamored by the system. That indoctrination, you can see the indoctrination clearly in that system, which produces people who are just the yes men of the system.
Yeah, because you see, we have to remember there are Africans who love neocolonialism. I don't know why we should just accept that. There are Africans who love neocolonialism.
Brother Kwame.
Yes.
I want to just catch on Brother Koko on the point he's making.
Don't just catch it. Continue and share the meeting.
No, I'm asking him a question.
And I'm saying, when you've done that, share the meeting to the end. Thank you.
No, Brother Koko.
I'm listening, but
you are trying to defend Aristotle's position out of what you tried to think that was environmental condition, like fear of death, that informed his philosophical position, and rather the reality of a society. Brother Carrington and myself previously had thought that actually Aristotle cannot be seen like a philosopher, because to be a philosopher is to ask questions, not to report issues as they are. Aristotle is reporting to us how Greek society operated. Basically, how they embrace these issues of class and issues of hierarchies, the slaves and the rest. Having known the differences between when Socrates died and what Plato did, which I can also not defend Plato to disagreeing with Socrates' position being out of fear. But I think Socrates was a true philosopher who wanted actually to go to the depth of philosophy. And the philosophical depth is to ask question and find solution, to question a society rather than to report a society. Now, this as element of fear you are bringing in, even if it could have actually been the reason behind Aristotle's thinking, but Aristotle is going beyond fear to try to justify what he saw in a society. And actually, it cannot be fear because you can't claim that Greek society practiced these differences because of fear, but rather they appreciated it. And that's why you see in the previous paragraph, Aristotle, it said that Aristotle enjoined, in the last paragraph here, after my highlight, he enjoined his fellow countrymen not to enslave Greeks on racism, but only an inferior race. So I don't think racism is out of fear for either what will happen if you defend those who are supposed to be equal, but it is rather a feeling of something like a superiority and viewing other people to be less superior or less human. What do you think about that?
It's all pointing towards what I said before. So let's take your case, for instance. You were born in Kenya. When you were born in Kenya, I don't know when that was, who was in power at that time. Let's say Moi. Moi ran a system that he ran. And that system he ran, he learned it from the British. And he just continued with that system. So let's say, for instance, a child who was born around that time decided Moi is the best thing since sliced bread. He will continue doing that. One, either because he is enamored by Moi, or again because he's scared of falling foul to Moi's disciplinary attitude, because that's what I was told about Moi. Moi had the law under his hand, he had the forces, he had the security, and you can't do anything. There was very narrow limits within which you could operate under Moi. All right. Now let's look at Aristotle. Aristotle, he is born after Socrates was killed. Okay. And there is wide knowledge about what had happened. So he has a choice. He could either go through the path which Socrates was going on before he was murdered or killed, or listen to what Plato was preaching to him, which is what he did. So to me, it just shows someone who, if you say you see a superiority complex by him, to me, I see someone who was scared, or someone who just saw things as they are, and his fear, the fear didn't allow him to think beyond the narrow confines of the Greek society, the fear he had, the indoctrination which he got from Plato, and the absence of Socrates' way of thinking, in a way. So they clamped down on ways that Socrates was thinking about. So that people.
Why was the ANC not afraid then?
Pardon?
Why was the ANC not afraid?
Brother Coco.
Yes, brother.
I'll just ask a question before I get to Brother Glory, or will either I also have to come into this a bit, is that one, which should be the last question, but I'm starting with it. And I'll ask you, I'll request you to answer it as I finish the second question. If you were to be Aristotle, what will you have choose? Fear or execute what you wanted? And I'm telling this to what actually Nkrumah said about education, that there are some who go to attain education for conservative purposes or liberal purposes, but those who attain education for purpose of liberation. So Aristotle is a student who is attaining education. If you were to be Aristotle, what path would you have chosen? And beyond that, now the second question, do you want to mean that you can defend also those who enslaved our ancestors because they were acting out of fear of their masters, and therefore they had not the problem? And this then is where I will bring Brother Glory once you finish this.
No, let's start with the second. By me trying to analyze who Aristotle was, doesn't mean I'm saying what he did was right. So you are saying as if I'm defending him. I'm not defending his position.
Okay.
That to me, let's take that one out.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. Thank you for correcting that.
Yeah. So the first one, Aristotle, if he was really egalitarian in nature, or he was embracing egalitarianism, then the facts should have gone out of the window. They don't matter. You can make the facts as you go. As long as you embrace the fact that all men are created equal. And there are no differences, as it says here. There are no differences. There are no intrinsic differences with all human beings. All human beings are created equal, regardless of skills they have, shapes they have, skills, skin colors, or anything else that they have. That doesn't matter. The differences should be only at functional level, as they say.
So
And
you
that's what
confirm,
Aristotle.
Brother Coco, so you confirm that Aristotle was an idealist and it was not out of fear. Because you're saying if he was to be an egalitarian, which means he wasn't, and therefore that is not out of fear. That's out of choice of being an idealist.
So as I said to you, he was stopped from thinking or using his brain, which he was given at birth, by clinging onto the facts, clinging onto how his society lived. So that's what they say, how his society lived. And as I said, that bit of society is what restrained him from thinking.
Proceed. I will have asked a question is, what is the purpose of fact? Should a fact be the foundation of a change, or a fact should be affirmation of a society? Because if fact is that the people of Lesotho are poor, and that's a fact, does it serve as a foundation to improve their life, or it serves as a foundation to confirm their poverty and defend it?
The fact is where we are starting from. We are starting from there. It's not to defend it. We cannot cling to it and eat it. All right? We cannot eat poverty. Why should we eat poverty? Why should we not have better? Materialism. We have materials on our land. Why are we the poorest of the poor? Why are we bottom of the food chain as Africans? It's a fact. We know that our food, our resources are being used somewhere else. We are just exporting raw materials. Those are facts. So what do we do about the facts? Should we cling to them and say, okay, this is what we are? No. It's a starting point.
But that's what Aristotle is doing. That is what Aristotle is doing, is clinging to the fact.
No, you don't cling to it as if you are born there and you have to die there. No, that's not using your brain progressively. Right?
Okay. Can you land? Can you end to your landing so that I can allow Brother Glory to come in maybe 3 to 4 minutes as we end?
No, as I said, I have really exhausted this as much as possible, but it's important for us to understand that education is to improve people's way of thinking. It's not just to absorb information, facts, or knowledge. You don't end there by just accumulating that and then stopping there. What are you going to do with all of that? Are you going to be a walking library? No. You need to think about how is that going to benefit my people? How is that going to benefit me? That's how we're supposed to think. Again, we as Pan-Africans, we need to think, with all of this knowledge that we have, what can we do better? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. As an economist, having learned the economy of Africa as it is, and in a scholarly text, your education should be how to improve African economy than rather how to put statistics to affirm how African economy is doing wrong. And that is actually what you're saying, that many belong to the third category of students who seek education for purpose of liberation, not for purpose of just affirmation and papers. Brother Glenn, I'd like you to come in as you share your thinking with us.
Well, I was listening more, but just to say, I agree with the fact that accumulation of knowledge is not the be all and end all. It's the application of that knowledge that is crucial. Otherwise, what are you, as Brother Coco said, what are you gathering information for? So it's the application that I think is necessary. I'm not going to get into whether it was an act of cowardice that stopped Plato speaking up. I think we need a deeper consideration of that. On the surface, it does appear to be that because of what happened to his teacher. But I would like to read more on that rather than express that. But on the issue of knowledge, very much agree with Brother Coco. If we don't apply it, why are we acquiring it? Thank you.
Thank you. You've been brave, and thank you. Let me get to Sister Marlin because you're having a few minutes.
Sorry, before
okay.
Can I?
Yes.
I wasn't suggesting that Aristotle acted out of fear. I just simply posed a question. So let it not be that I am saying that
no, but no, but I think there is a sense of self-preservation. It's not necessarily fear, but it is about how do you avoid the repetition of the same thing when society hasn't advanced to the point where it would recognize people's worth, But fear is just a terminology. I think being shrewd or being strategic can also suffice. But it was clear that he was holding back. And the question is, if he had the knowledge, should he not be saying more? I think that's the quandrum. And as I said, I think I'd like to read more about that rather than.
Fine. But like in reading about it, I want you to also just bear in mind that I wasn't suggesting that he acted out of fear. The reason he may not have been acting out of fear was what we read, which is affirmed by the text, that Aristotle believed slavery was natural and necessary for society, arguing that some people were naturally suited to be slaves due to their mental capacities. That's what he believed. So he's not acting because he's afraid. The guy believed in the thing.
Thank you for bringing that up again. And I think you being a union leader and Gloria has worked also in the same prospect. If you're in a society,
that's why I love Brother Gloria so much.
No, yeah. If you're in a society or a company that practice injustice, do you just go by it because you want to exist in a system, or do you speak about it? And there are so many people who say, because it doesn't affect me and it affects somebody else who is my brother, I won't speak about it. So let me survive and earn my pay and go away. And that is the situation that then do not bring a liberation or a revolution in a society. So we abide by the norms because, after all, it's the society, it's the company norm, it's whatever. So as long as it's not about me, and that's now solipsism and individualism, the idealism in it, I won't speak about it. So let me hear what Sister Marin has to say, and then I'll end with Brother the King in a minute. Sister Marin, sorry for keeping you at bay for this long, but I hope you have something to say. Sister Marin?
It just sounds very confusing what's being said. And I'm not even sure what to add to it, but we as a people need to, create a strategy and go back to our original way of doing things, because the Western society have just created us a lot of muddle, a lot of, not caring for one another, and just me, and that's all that seems to matter, me, and nothing else is of any importance to us. Yeah, and that's what I'll say.
Brother the King, thank you for a minute, Brother the King. Brother the King. Okay. Brother Kwame, please come in as we get towards the tail end. Brother Carrington has said our sessions have been lively, but today the session is alive.
Sorry, what did you say? He said that they've been what?
Our sessions have been lively, but today the session was alive.
Well, let's continue to make it alive. Thank you very much. So, Brother Pigeon, that's it. I think it's 8 o'clock. So make the announcements, and then let's bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, comrades. I have actually also enjoyed this session. I thought, or I still think maybe 2 paragraphs were too heavy, but I shared them because they were almost conjoined in terms of the flow of thoughts. But thank you for this session. I'll ensure that this session is available for our review on our sites next week with the editing of some few things that came at the Saturday be there. But I'll also say that we will communicate the exact topic on our Saturday. I'll discuss that. By tomorrow, maybe we should be having a circulation of what we're discussing. But always just bear in mind that we've been discussing political economy of Africa, and we've dealt so much for the last 3 weeks on economic angle. We look for something on a political angle so that we still focus on our conversation on Africa unification. So, comrades, I do appreciate your time, your commitment here, and I do request you that you continue joining us. Those who are watching, share your comments, and let's move on together, because it appears it's really deep. Mother Carrington, I've ended this. And it's so burning.
Not for the recording, but I can offer to talk about AI on Saturday or any other Saturday which people can choose. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll get in touch with you. I think it's very handy. It's come in hand with this. So I'll get in touch with you for immediately after this so that we discuss that. Okay, thank you all. So let's meet on Saturday.